Hi guys, this is Mo Volans for Tuts Plus, back with another couple of video tutorials this month. In fact, probably four, two of which are going to be quick tips. But the usual format, in these larger ones I'm going to go through some more in-depth production techniques. And I'm actually going to be looking at Logic Pro 10 in this tutorial and Reason version 7 in another. So in this video, we're looking at a project that's in its really early stages of development. It actually went on to be a bigger project, but this is it in its sort of very early stages. And it's really just a loop. We've just got a drum track or a selection of drums, which is what we're going to be concentrating on. And then there's really only three instrumental parts. There's a bass part. Let me just play the whole thing back. So it's sort of a deep electronica, deep house sort of workout. And there's this bass part which was sampled from an analog synth, I think a bass station or a Moog that's in here, and then filtered. It was sampled wide open and then filtered with the Moog filter with some delay on. So you get the picture there. Then there's something coming off the Virus TI, which is just sort of a really light arpeggio, and then there's this interesting atmospheric layer, again filtered with a Moog filter. Went crazy with these on this one, and sort of sounds like a pad layer, but I think it's made up of 4 or 5 different parts, and then again filtered. So a lot of the parts here have been exported, and when it comes to the drums, the same sort of philosophy was used really. We've got a couple of different kick drums, 1, 2, and then we've got a percussion loop, which is sort of the main loop, and I'm going to show you that first. And then there's 2 supporting percussion loops. Now, although these are drum loops, this one at least was programmed in machine. So it was actually programmed from separate hits, and then I know at least one of these was cut up from 2 different loops. And basically what I've started to do recently is do this and then export them into loops so it's easier to deal with in the final mix. But first of all, we've got 2 kick drums. In fact, I'll show you this percussion loop first, because this is where I started with the drums. Now you can hear that it sounds like a really simple sort of a light percussion or drum loop. But originally it was programmed in machine as a full loop. And you can see here all the processors that are on it. I think there's 4 processors total. Let's get them all up. And what I'll do is I'll actually bypass them. I'll switch them off, and then I'll show you exactly what they're doing. So there you can hear I've switched everything off, and you can hear it's nearly full range. But I think the point of it was, for me, it wasn't quite big enough to use by itself. So I decided that I wanted to use it as a supporting loop. And to do that, I started off by gating it with this SSL strip here. Let's bring this into the center. And you can really hear that. So I wanted to take off some of the sustain and some of the noise in between hits. And then I went ahead and filtered off the low end. I think I'm developing a little bit of a cough here. To ensure that if I put a kick drum with it, there was going to be some space to breathe at the bottom, and then some spatial effects. Bit of interesting delay there, just really, really high end. And then a tiny bit of sort of small church hall reverb, but I think I turned the decay down. So that's how I started the track, and then I started to layer these kick drums. And there's actually 2 kick drums. There's one that's sort of quite boxy, and then I layered a deeper one, like an 808, which is always a great way of adding low end. You know, I think I filtered some of that. I think I'd maybe even filter a bit more top off there, but they were actually treated a little bit in machine. These were both programmed in machine and then exported, so that's why they appear as plain audio. You can even see the group names. Okay, so together they were quite nice, and then with the extra high-end kick that's in this loop, I was pretty happy with that sort of overall sound. But I wanted a bit more groove, so I added some hats, and these have just got a bit of high pass and a little bit of air from the Mag EQ, just to add some high end. And then we've got this sort of percussion loop. And the main characteristic of this is that it's got automation on it, and I like doing this with filters rather than cutting a loop. So I wanted the first part of the loop, like without the automation, it's like this. Which I'll probably do later in the track as the track opens up, but I just wanted that first section. And I could have cut it, but I like to have a humanized recorded filter to cut off the sections I don't want. And then there is some high pass, some compression, and some chamber based reverb. And then finally on the drums, there's this hit, which is really sort of epic in nature. So it's going through an API channel strip, but you know, anything that adds sort of a bit of saturation will do, because I'm mainly using this to add gain on the preamp here. Let's have this in isolation actually so you can hear it. And it's sort of like an epic electronica hit. I've filtered a load of bottom end off using the high pass filter, and I think I added some high end as well with the EQ, and that's about it in there. But the main part of this sound is just a huge high end reverb with 9 seconds of decay on it. Without this, that's what it sounds like without the reverb. Not quite as epic. So I think on the right element, these huge reverbs can really work well, because the rest of the drum track is pretty dry and it's all layered. So you've got, you know, your kick drums. We've got our low end kick drum, a slightly higher end kick drum, and then an even higher end kick drum in this loop, which then introduces snare and sort of hats. Then we've got higher end hats, and then we've got some percussion, and this really fills the whole thing out. So working together. And then the whole thing's going through a group. And I might go ahead and add some parallel compression to this, maybe some more saturation. But that gives you an idea of how you can go ahead and layer a mixture of hits and loops and effects to build up a good drum track. Well, at least a drum track that works well and fills all the frequencies and ticks all the right boxes. And I think you're probably looking about 8 to 10 parts in there, even though it only looks like 4 loops. I think there's probably, you know, 3 or 4 parts within some of those that I programmed, especially this cut machine loop here. That was maybe 4 or 5 parts. But treated in the right way, they can all fit together quite nicely. And then with the rest of the parts, I think the virus may have gone out of time, and it has a habit of doing that. Let's play it without the virus. Yeah, so there you go. That's one way of layering some drum parts, and hopefully this has given you a bit of inspiration and given you an idea of how you can, you know, mix up hits and loops and use your loops effectively in a mix down. I'm going to show you another technique in Reason, and that's going to be grabbing hardware synths, recording them and twisting them by changing them into Rex loops, and this is completely omitting the use of recycle, because in Reason 7 it's built right in. And that's what we're going to be looking at next. You'll probably see this video in a week or 2, I would imagine. And then you'll see the quick tips, which are going to be synthesis based, sometime across the next 4 weeks. As always, if you've got any suggestions, if there's anything else you want to see that's logic based or mix down based or synthesis based, just let me know, and I'll do my best to fit it into my to-do list and get it out there for you. Cheers.